everybody. Welcome to the Weird World Podcast, where we give you a podcast about weird things. My name's Carrie.
I'm Dean.
What do you have for us today, Dean?
Carrie, we got a short one here today.
Okay.
We've got something that I like to call the monsters of the Philippines.
You like to call it this?
I do.
Oh, great. Okay.
It's one of my favorite pastimes. So, have you ever heard of something called the Aswang? No idea if I'm pronouncing that right. Aswang.
Nope.
It's kind of it's a term actually for a variety of supernatural creatures resident in the Philippines, from like shape-shifting creatures to vampire-like creatures to were animals like were dogs and witches and one of my favorite, viscera suckers, that have been in Philippine folklore for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer.
Oh.
The Spanish first wrote about them in the 1600s, or even maybe even earlier than that. I think that maybe even the late 16th century they wrote about them, and of course they were, like they're true, but they're deeply embedded in Philippine folklore and Philippine legends. The Aswang is basically 5 different animals or creatures within it. So you got your vampire, you got your viscera sucker. You're going to like that one, by the way.
Okay.
You get a were dog, you got a witch, and you have a ghoul.
Okay, wait. This isn't one creature that's all of these things. This is
No.
a family of creatures.
Exactly.
Okay,
and they
gotcha.
go under the umbrella term, the Aswang. Or
Okay.
Aswang. Or I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to say Aswang, just to consistently mispronounce it. The vampire version can, of course, disguise itself as a beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And sucks blood like a traditional Western vampire, but does so not with sharp teeth and sucking it out from the throat. It actually uses a hollow tubular tongue. Like, I guess kind of like butterflies, right? Don't butterflies use that?
I think so.
I think. And that's, I don't know if they pierce, but whatever. They get access to the blood and they suck it out.
They would have to pierce
Yes,
something.
I suppose they would. They live in forests, usually around towns, but they very often join human communities by marrying into those communities. Again, they can appear as a attractive female.
Uh-huh.
They marry into to the community, and then sometimes they'll drain the blood, use the husband as a blood host, or they will kind of use their house as just a base of operations and prey on the surrounding area.
Are they always women?
I guess. They usually prey at night. In fact, all these different versions are night creatures, and they don't have the same powers by day. That's a consistency. And by the way, they were most prevalent on the island of Panay, kind of the central Philippines. Philippines, as you know, has over 7,000 islands in the archipelago.
I was going to say I know nothing of Philippine islands.
Carrie.
I just know that they exist. I don't know how many or what their names are.
I'm now apologizing to the nation of the Philippines, a proud people, many here in the U.S.
I know.
In the healthcare sector, as a matter of fact, quite common.
I know a lot of people from
Thank
the
you for your
Philippines.
service. So, and mostly in the province around Capiz is where they are most prevalent. The second group is called the viscera sucker, also called locally the Manon Nangal, which I know I'm mispronouncing that, but I'm sorry. They live basically on your internal organs, or the, quote, phlegmatic discharge of the sick, which sounds delicious.
Snot.
I think so.
Yes.
Or both, I guess. It doesn't sound nearly as nutritious as organs, does it?
Sure.
It's a protein
No,
with
yeah.
the organs.
Yeah.
So it also consumes its food with its tongue. Again, a narrow, kind of hollow tube-like tongue.
Yeah.
By day, it also takes the shape of an attractive, light-skinned and long-haired woman. I don't know why that's important to point out. By night, this is awesome. Okay, so it is a segmenting creature. It basically disconnects it grows wings at nighttime, disconnects its upper half from its lower half, hides its lower half in the bushes somewhere so no one finds it, and then goes off and preys on humans by flying around the forest at night with just its upper half, which is now winged.
Okay.
So, that's phenomenal.
It is pretty clever and creative.
That's great. I love that. It is particularly attracted to the fetuses within pregnant women. So just a plus.
Ew.
And then there's the others. There's the were-dog. Philippines has no wolves, as you know, so they take the form of were-dog. Every continent, it's funny, has some kind of a were-animal. Werewolves were very, very common in the U.S., of course. I'm sorry, in Europe, of course, because wolves were a scary creature. But in Russia, they had were-bears, and in Africa, they have were-leopards. I think they have were-thylacines in Australia and Tasmania, I'm assuming, because they should. It makes sense.
Well, so this people shift into dogs. Yes. Is that the idea?
Yep, okay. That's the idea. A classic were. They have a witch version of the Aswang, and they're terrible. They curse you. So these witches are able to lay a curse upon you, and often it takes the manifestation of that is that horrible things come out of your body, like rice, bones, insects. Things come out of your bodily orifices if you're cursed by an Aswang witch.
Rice.
Rice, yes.
Well, that could be
That's
helpful.
Not as bad as bones and insects, I suppose. You're right. That's true. Oh, my God, this rice out of my nose. You know what, you guys? I'm a little hungry. So they also live in the outskirts of towns. They live in the forest. And there's also the ghoul. Of course, there is a traditional ghoul-like creature. The ghoul in European legend eats corpses. So do they.
Oh, okay.
And all of these things are basically, things that the Filipino culture finds vile and awful. They attack families, they attack good people, and they do terrible things. And Filipinos don't like those things, so these are their demons, essentially.
Sure. Usually attractive women.
They by day. Is that legend universal, pretty much?
I don't know. It's pretty misogynistic.
A little.
Though.
Yes. They usually go in the daytime, but there's things, and they attack at night, and in the daytime, sometimes, as I mentioned, they're not as powerful. There's lots of remedies or countermeasures you can do to drive them away. You can use holy objects, which is loosely defined, spices, salt, ash, the tail of a stingray, large crustaceans, vinegar, betel nut chew, and urine. All those things have the potential to drive away an Aswang.
What's betel nut chew?
It's a betel nut is a type of nut, and you chew it, and then you get a big mass of gunk, and they don't like that. Who would?
Yuck.
They are also believed to cause miscarriages. Yeah. So sometimes a countermeasure for a young pregnant couple would be for the husband to go under the floor. Often their homes be raised right above the ground floor, above the ground.
Yeah.
And so the husband would hide under the floor of their house, and he would have a sword and furiously wave the sword all around to scare away the Aswang, which I think is good. They can also use sharp sticks, bolos, and they would use something called an anti-Aswang oil made from coconut oil and some other things. And they would had a great way of detecting the Aswang. You know how the European vampire, it doesn't reflect in the mirror, right? Here's how you could detect an Aswang that was in disguise in the room with you, right? Mm-hmm. You would look into the reflection in someone else's eye, and if the person was inverted, they were an Aswang. I like that.
Inverted, like they'd be upside down or backwards?
Probably, I'm assuming backwards.
Huh, that would be hard to tell.
Very difficult, but worth the effort if you think you have an Aswang in the room with you, I think. Mm-hmm. And to kill them, you use a bolo knife, stab it in the middle of the back. But you got to do what you're going to do, Carrie, okay? So that's the story of the Aswang. One theory, by the way, is that on Panay is known for something that they would rather not be known for, I'm sure. It's a genetic mutation called XDP, X-linked dystonia Parkinsonism. It's a genetic form of dystonia, and it's almost entirely found in Filipino males. 93% of current cause of cases are located on just Panay Island, and 63% of those are just in the area around Cadiz, which is just part of the island. So it's a very specific genetic mutation. It causes a pretty terrible debilitation. Individuals are who have it have these pretty awful symptoms. They become in what's called a transforming state, which their bodies become twisted, their tongues might stick out or protrude or get swollen, and they salivate copiously.
Yeah.
So it was not a good thing to have. It's still not a good thing to have. And what happened, though, is sadly, as you might imagine, in more primitive society, they were shunned.
Yeah.
And so they may have lived in the forest like these
monsters.
Aswangs were said to live, and live on the fringes of society and became marginalized. So that some people think that's what caused the origin of this folklore. So that's the Aswang. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about a modern use of the Aswang, if that's the right word. We fast forward to World War II. As you know, the U.S. controlled the Philippines from the Spanish War in 1898 all the way through World War II.
Mm-hmm.
During World War II, the Filipino guerrillas fought against the Japanese to reclaim their island. One of the main groups fighting them was called the Huks. It's a much longer version of it. Huk, well, it's not that long actually. Huk Balahap, which but they're short and often called the Huks. They're a rebel group. Again, they were anti-imperialism, anti-Japanese, pro-independence. So right after the war ended, of course, even almost as the war is winding down, the U.S. naturally sought to do what? Maintain control of the Philippines. So started fighting against the Huks, even though the Huks were had to help the U.S. throughout the entire war. Typical.
United States.
So after World War II, there was a quick falling out, and the U.S. set up essentially a quasi puppet state in the Philippines. And the Huks were elected to parliament. They took place in the first democratic elections. But what happened is that the Huks were kicked out of the Congress because the kind of pro-U.S. president, they wanted to have essentially pass a trade bill that grossly favored the U.S. The Huks didn't like that. They wanted a truly free U.S. The U.S. Granted the Philippines independence very quickly after World War II, but again, sought to maintain control politically by essentially controlling the government, controlling trade, etc. And so the Huks essentially went back to war and took up guerrilla war tactics by 1946 or 7 or so. And the U.S. fought them in mostly the South and I think the Central Philippines. And in 1950, a guy named Edward Lansdale was sent over. He worked for the CIA. He was a former marketing genius at Madison Avenue and a real piece of work. He essentially invented refined psyops, psychological operations. Mm-hmm. The idea that if you can't defeat your enemy by force, you do so through psychological means. And so he set about, studying and had his people brought over his whiz kids. I'm sure they're all from Harvard and Yale. And he brought them over to the Philippines and they started researching anything they could about the country, including Filipino folklore. And they found out about the Aswang, this vampire-like creature that was deeply embedded, particularly in Panay, where there was a lot of Huk guerrilla activity.
Okay.
So Lansdale says, you know what? Let's use that. So Lansdale came up with the genius idea at about 1950 to scare the population to not like the Huks by using the Aswang legend. So one of the first things they did was pretty basic. They waited for a cloudy day, and then they had planes fly over villages using loudspeakers attached to them, and they projected Aswang witch curses onto the towns in the native Tagalog language onto the villagers. And these supposedly they meant to kind of make them resent the Huk fighters or something like that, or blame the Huk fighters somehow.
Yeah.
And I think they even by name focused on people that they suspected of being Huk sympathizers or Huk fighters in the local area. So the idea was that you would target those towns with a lot of Huk activity, curse them, and they would, stop supporting the Huks. It wasn't super clear.
But were the people not supposed to realize that the curses were coming from airplanes flying overhead?
I'm not 100% sure, as Rachel would say, on that. But the idea was that you'd scare, or maybe you'd scare them out of the villages into the forest, and they would, starve. It doesn't seem super well thought out.
Yeah.
But that was just sort of plan A, right? Plan B was a little more insidious, a little more effective, probably. They identified Huck sympathizers again, and which really included anybody giving any support. So. Shades of the Vietnam War, by the way.
Yeah.
Anybody who wasn't, if you're not for me, you're against me, kind of an idea. When most people just want to be left alone. So what they do is they then at night they sneak to the houses of these Huck sympathizers or even Huck soldiers, and they paint these like spooky looking eyes that they called eyes of God on them, and that would draw attention to these Huck sympathizers. And again, the idea was that you'd make all the population be against them because, look, you're causing these bad things to happen to our town. These scary things are happening to our town, so beat it.
Yeah.
What was the idea? The next thing they decided to do was a little more direct. They would, again, identify a Huck sympathizer, or even better, a Huck guerrilla. They'd kidnap that person. They would kill that person. They would slit them open, hang them upside down to drain them of all blood, and then they'd go find someplace like a crossroads or something, and they'd leave the body there.
Wait, the American people
the
did
American
this?
people, the CIA, and American forces did this, and they then would rely on the locals to find this body and say, "Oh my God, this was the victim of an Aswang. There are Aswang attacking our villages." And that's a Huck sympathizer they killed. They're going after the Huck people. Again, we don't like these Huck people in our presence. Now they're attracting Aswang into our village, and they're going to kill us too.
That sounds like a war crime.
That it was absolutely a war crime. And the idea was, and Edward Lansdale would write his memoir and say how effective all these things were. Were they really effective? That's, open to debate. I don't know how effective they really were. He kind of has a monopoly on information there. But that was kind of what he thought was the most effective tactic that they did.
And he's proud of that.
Very proud of it. Bragged about it in his memoir.
Okay, he's a monster.
So oh my God, Carrie, that was really good, because when I, at the front of this podcast, said, we're going to call this the Monsters of the Philippines, I was going to end by asking you, who are the real monsters of the Philippines in this story?
That guy.
I'll leave it to you to decide, but I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And that is the story of the Aswang and the monsters of the Philippines. Told you be a quickie.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Dean.
Hey, anytime. That's a short one. Please listen in on our next long one coming up. That I'm sure will be uploaded on Thursday. Okay.
Bye.
See you guys.